Hello and welcome to Knowledge Snippets with DR.SANDHYA. Today we will learn about the characteristics of Renaissance. Renaissance and rebirth of classical literature. Before the dawn of Renaissance, a tiny fraction of society, that is, philosophers, writers, and theologians, were acquainted with the translations of the Greek literature. Nobody except these people used to study the classical literature. Common people were not aware of the taste of classical literature. That's why the study of classical literature was only confined to the philosophers, writers, and theologians. When Renaissance came to Italy, it provided a unique opportunity to a layman to study the translation of the Greek literature. People showed keen interest in the study of classical literature. They diverted their focus from medieval literature to the study of classical literature. People diverted their attention from philosophical controversies of the medieval ages to the study of classical literature. The medieval ages was losing its authority not only in the ambit of literature but in many spheres of society. Many writers started writing in the manner of classical writers. They refused to follow the conventions of medieval ages. That's why Renaissance is regarded as the death of medieval ages. The second important characteristic of this age is objectivity. Objectivity is another important trait of Renaissance period. Renaissance pressed upon the people to derive their knowledge from concrete and visible world, not from abstract ideas. It brought an immense interest in the visible world, not in the abstract world of idealism. It rejected the philosophical discussions of Aristotle. Though Christianity was not abandoned, Renaissance focused more on concrete things instead of musing upon the idea of life after death. Next important characteristic that we will discuss is individualism. We find in the Renaissance the rise of individualism. In medieval ages, a writer was an anonymous personality. Nobody knew about his personality and talents. They used to write anonymous poetry and stories. We know that there are many medieval poems whose authorship is still in dark. Nobody knows who wrote them. It was with the birth of Renaissance that a writer started keen interest in his fame and popularity. He rejected to conceal his name and write anonymously. The new writer had to sign his work before handing it to someone so that he may retain its proprietorship. Thus, Renaissance resulted in individualism. Next, it was a revolt against the authority of Pope. So, one of the important characteristics of Renaissance is its revolt against the authority of Pope. In the medieval ages, church was a hotbed of profligacy, materialism, and corruption. W.H. Hudson says in this regard, of spiritual zeal and energy, very little was now felt in the country. The greater prelates heaped up wealth and lived in a godless and worldly way. The rank and file of the clergy were ignorant and careless. The friars were notorious for their greed and profligacy. This Renaissance is regarded as a decline in the authority of Pope. The courts, instead of providing spiritual panacea to the general public, got engaged in corruption, administrative setups, and worldly matters. According to Encyclopedia, the prestige of the church also suffered when some church leaders sold their services, violated the biblical laws they were entrusted with upholding, and lived no differently than secular merchants and political figures. Furthermore, the leaders of the growing city states as well as the new monarchs had much less need of an alliance with the Catholic Church to maintain power than they had in the past. Popes like Alexander VI, Julius II, and Leo X were mainly concerned with politics and promotion of their families. They failed to maintain their influence in the society as popes. With the dawn of Renaissance, supporters of the Catholic Church became more and more outspoken against the authority of Pope. So much so, the French king in the 14th century issued orders that papal courts be shifted to Avignon. Next is humanism in Renaissance. Humanism is another salient feature of Renaissance. Humanism is a philosophical term that lays great stress on the dignity and core values of human beings. According to Microsoft Dictionary, humanism is the secular, cultural, and intellectual movement of the Renaissance that spread throughout Europe as a result of the rediscovery of the arts and philosophy of the ancient Greeks and Romans. Humanists did not follow the ideals of medieval ages in writing. They thought that Christianity could not be the inspiration for their creative works. They stood against the medieval writers who mostly used religious themes in their writing. Religion was a prime source of inspiration for a work of art or literature. In contrast to medieval writers, humanists were mainly concerned with secular subjects, and materialism was the sole cause of secularism of humanists. Humanists believed that classical writers can teach you how to live your life. Important humanists are Mirandola, Petrarca, Bruni, Boccaccio, etc. Then the next characteristic is exploration. Exploration is the hallmark of Renaissance. In the age of Renaissance, merchants wanted to expand their business across the international boundaries. For this purpose, they got engaged in exploring new markets in Asia and newly discovered world, the Americas. People also showed interest in purchasing exotic goods. Christopher Columbus was the person who discovered America. As a result of these speculative voyages, new trading bases and new ports where ships could take on fresh supplies during long journeys were established all over the world. Another trait which is significant is the development or growth of science. Renaissance was an age of objectivity and experimentation. That's why science thrived. The achievements of science can be witnessed in many fields: in medicine, in anatomy, navigation, exploration by Columbus, etc. Italian physicist and astronomer Galileo presented this theory that the earth revolved around the sun, disputing the belief held by the Roman Catholic Church that the earth was the center of the universe. He refused to obey orders from Rome to cease discussions of his theories and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Galileo's work influenced other Renaissance scientists and encouraged the development of the scientific method. Sir Isaac Newton formulated his theory of three laws of motion. Alongside all these developments in science, architecture is a very important characteristic that represents uniqueness of the Renaissance period. Renaissance architecture was mainly inspired by the principles of Greek and Roman architectures. Renaissance architects tried their best to revive the Greek and Roman architecture in their age. They looked for inspiration to an antiquity These are the prominent characteristics of the Renaissance period. Hope you have understood, and this is going to be of use to you with regard to your preparation for exams, whether they are competitive or regular exams. Thank you.